thanks for tuning in. I am Dr. Mo Al-Khalaf, a postdoctoral research fellow here at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute, and I am back as your host for today's episode of BEaTS Research Radio, a YouTube channel and podcast streamed from an active lab at the University of Ottawa Heart Institute. Our goal at BEaTS Research Radio is to communicate science to the community. Our guest today is Dr. Cristian Andrés Zaelzer Pérez, a scientist and the founder and president of the Convergence Initiative. Additionally, a research associate at the Center for Research on Neuroscience in the Brain Repair and Integrative Neuroscience program of the Research Institute of the McGill University Health Center. Additionally, Dr. Zaelzer Pérez is a lecturer at the Department of Design and Computation and an art science advisor for the Faculty of Fine Arts at Concordia University. Thank you so much, Cristian, for joining us today. It is an honor and a pleasure to host you for this interview. I'd like to start our discussion today with the chance for you to share with us some of what you considered impactful early career events that shaped your direction into science and the interesting overlap and space that exists between science and art.
Hi, Mo. So thank you so much for having me today. So what were the events that impactful to make this change? That's a really interesting question, actually. It's funny I say it's interesting. It's like we scientists always say that when someone asks something. Well, to be honest, I have several startings in different careers. So I started actually my professional life as a coding professional. I was working for a company that was developing software. And then after that, I jumped to the graphic design and the graphic arts. And I worked for several years in an advertisement company as a graphic designer. It was later in life when I started to look for my other many passions, which one is science. And I pursued a career in science, and that brought me to finally, after many, many years, do a PhD in molecular and cell biology back in Chile. So this mix of things has been always at the core of my own essence, to be able to explore different things without feeling that you should fulfill just one particular pattern, which is most of what we do in contemporary professions today, to dedicate to just one thing and one thing only. And the need during time for make a better bridges between science and the community also pushed me to just merge these things together, this knowledge and these passions together back in the form of what become convergence. I think we're having a great need today for improve our skills as a communicators. We scientists, we have a huge problems with how we pass all the things that we do in the lab to the community. We mostly share among us, and the people just get very little and usually very tergiversed information, like not at all what was meant to come from the lab. So I think that is part of our responsibility to do this information accessible, especially because it's the people who is paying for the work that we are doing in the labs. So that I would say is kind of like a very quick summary of how I arrived to this point.
Which is excellent there, and it highlights the in fact you're an example of a multidisciplinary approach to how we can engage with the community and even perform science between the graphic design, art, and molecular biology. And to that, I'm going to ask you, in what ways can art be recruited in academia to elevate and enhance the classic scientific journey that students and early career folks navigate to succeed in institutions?
Well, it is very interesting that in all the time that we are becoming scientists, we are getting trained to develop certain set of skills and frame them in the scientific method. So this is not a common training. It takes several years from, you getting your career in the university as undergrad. You have 4 years of training just to have a profession. This doesn't give you even a brush of what the scientific method is. Then you jump to the master programs where you get 2 years of starting with this real, how the scientific method works. If you go to the PhD, it's 4 or 5 years more, 7 years more, and then a postdoc. So you spend mostly like 12 to 15 years in training, constantly changing your mind in how you observe the world, how you answer questions, how these questions affect you. And this change, this training per se, create a huge gap between us and the narratives that happen in the life of people that didn't get this training. So because these narratives are so different, to create a bridge between these two languages gets very complicated. That plus that we suffer of something called the paradox, where more you learn, more difficult is explain that knowledge to a level where you don't have the same amount of knowledge. And the confirmation bias that say that you just get information of things that you already like. So these together make really, really difficult how to write there. We take our science and we remove all the emotional aspect of the science to make it as unbiased as possible. And the problem is that we communicate with human beings, and human beings, we are emotional per definition. We react, our brain react primarily fast to emotional cues, things that cause fear or happiness or things, and then we reasoning. And this go back, philosophical thinking. David Hume talk about this, about how we actually are creatures of habit, and this habit come because of our feeling and our emotions. So if we want to talk and we want to include a better communication and do it in the settings of the science, artists are the best for help us to recognize this emotionality. And I know it can be counterproductive, counterintuitive, sorry, for think about this when you are a scientist. Think like, oh, what is the value to get an artist to teach me something that, why? But the truth is, like, the emotional tools and disciplines that they develop and they work are extremely valuable for us as scientists to get this communication back, to get this humanity in our science that can connect to the people and can help to people to grasp concepts or get interested in those concepts. Sometimes we don't need, and actually we don't need all the jargon that we use in our science to communicate the science. If we remove that, we make science more interesting, more aspects of them that are like really connecting with the people, we will get people get interested and ask more. And I think that's the value that get, to including graphic design and fine arts in our exploration of knowledge communication.
That's excellent. That's fantastic to focus on. In fact, I'm going to maybe dig in a little bit deeper on that specific aspect. So, as someone that basically travels within the circles of scientists and artists, can you provide the audience with like an insider view of how scientists and artists are similar, but also how are they different, but can still positively influence each other?
Yeah, for sure. So there exist more similarities between scientists and artists than people usually see. One of the things that we do is we have a course at Concordia University that is taught with my colleague Bettina Forget, who's in the fine art department. And in this course, what we do is we put neuroscience students and science students from graduate programs from McGill University with our graduate students and undergraduate students from fine art from Concordia University. And they get in conversations just to analyze uh, how their worlds look like. And in this conversation, the most common thing that happens is like, oh, we also experience that. So seems like in science, you will have a method to do things. The same thing happens in arts too. And the arts method use also observation and questioning and iteration and experimentation and coming back to the question to see if you arrive to some point or how this spark more questions. Um, the same thing happened, right, with the scientific method, where you have an observation, a hypothesis, experiments, analysis of the result of the experiment, and you come back to your questions. The difference between both of them is the questions that pursue science usually try to get to an end to answer, and then from there move to the next thing. The questions in art sometimes are more open to discussion and just to interpretation, so are a little bit more wide, but both disciplines look for understand how the world work, just with different tools. They experience exactly the same things in both worlds in relation to grants, in relations to publish or perish, which in the case of the art is produce or perish. So if you don't produce art, then you don't get grants money, and then you don't get funding, and then you disappear, as it happened in science with the papers. They also get pressure from the society at large to move in one particular direction to the things that are more hot in terms of research. And people that do research out of these hot spots have more difficulty to pursue in those particular careers. Um, what else is common between both worlds? Um, Most of them are afraid a little bit of each other. Like artists saying that scientists are extremely complicated, and they feel like if they will ask something, it could be seemed like you don't know. And when you get a scientist to talk to an artist, they get very quiet too, because they also get afraid to be judged as people that doesn't know. So if you put actually a scientist in an art gallery, you will experience this amazing phenomenon of see the scientist very quiet, not knowing what to ask or ask. And I interpret this as no one like to be seen like an ignorant person. So usually this afraid to be ignorant or seen as an ignorant will keep us from asking questions or wander around. And this is one of the things that we try to teach our students, that you have to ask questions. I mean, both of them separately ask questions all the time. It's just when you put each other, it's like they face this fear to being under the judgment of the other profession. This this disappears with time. What is the big difference between both of them? Well, scientists focus more in trying to find the truth with an unbiased method, which is discussable, right? We can discuss a lot about how unbiased is the science that we do and if we really find the truth or not. And artists look for perceptions of the world in a more open environment and with more experimentation. The other two differences, science today, even when we do a lot of experiments, is very restricted in how much freedom we have to just play around, to experiment and to develop new things, because how costly is do science. In the arts, you have more this freedom to play and to create and make mistakes and learn from that mistake in a more easy way than happen in the science. And then the other difference is just one of them try to be objective, eliminating emotionality, and the other one is based purely or mostly in emotionality.
That's fascinating, especially since the work that an artist would do is, maybe for I would interpret the work that artists do is to provoke emotion and provoke emotionality and a sense of understanding and maybe like exploring beyond what you're seeing right there. While in science, it is not about emotionality, but in fact just seeing and addressing exactly what you see here as factual as much as possible without having to interpret this outside of what it is telling you specifically, right? So that you can
Yeah,
stay as accurate and precise as possible.
that, that's a very sorry.
Go
That,
ahead.
that's actually is very interesting because um, while artists are trying to provoke, one of the things that they do also is asking questions about if should be or not should done. While our scientists ask the question about why this happened. And the research in science provoke the creation and the openness for new ethical dilemmas. So every time that we push one boundary in science, a new ethic question appear. And usually a part of the ethicists are the artists, the one that pick up the question and ask it back to the scientists. So it's a really interesting and I think absolutely necessary feedback that you get when you get the two communities working together, because they retro they feedback each other about the type of knowledge and how to pursue the knowledge. And sometimes scientists are not aware of a particular aspect of the question that they're pursuing, and an artist will notice it. So it's a very very useful feedback.
You can definitely see how they can complement one another in a way that will then enhance the communities that they belong to.
Yeah.
And speaking about communities, let's delve into the path that led you, Christian, a scientist, towards the realm of science communication. Since science communication is all about trying to get the science that is done within the scientific bubble, academia, research, healthcare, and all of that, and then try to direct that towards a broader community. And I'll ask you right away to tell us in your own words, what is the role of a science communicator, and what are some of the ways that a science communicator can make essential and meaningful contributions to the communities and the fields they function within?
Okay, this is a fantastic question. So a few days ago, Jacinda Ardern actually she gave a public note, thanks, acknowledging and giving specifically thanks to the science communication community and how important it was this community to pass the science from the labs to the public, and how important this was to help to control, the situation with COVID-19 in New Zealand right now. So New Zealand is one of the countries that has done the best strategies to control. And according to Jacinda, that was in part not just thanks to the scientists that are working very hard, but thanks also to the science communicators that were able to translate this information to the public and make the public, give the public tools to choose and to make decisions informed. So the role of the science communicator in contemporary science is has to do precisely, this is one of the biggest roles that have to do, like how you translate the information from the science lab to the public, helping the public to make informed choices. The other important role that science communication has in contemporary science today is work as an equalizer. It makes science accessible. Science right now is extremely inaccessible for the people in the general community because jargon mostly, and because it's produced, we want to know, by white rich dudes. So those are the ones that usually arrive to the academia, that are able to pursue a career. And then we get all these other people right out of the science community: women, people of color, people with less capacity, monetary capacity, people from countries that don't have enough money. And the truth is, if we want to make the science useful for everybody, then everybody should have knowledge and inclusion in the scientific process. So science communications allow that science that's being produced right now for more elite classes can arrive now to places where there's no elite. So these people now can even have access to this information and even maybe feel that they can pursue these careers. Something that we have been talking a lot and is part of the contemporary problem of science is how we include other communities with other perspectives and other ideas about science and the problems that we could be pursuing and understanding in contemporary science. So the science communicator have a crucial role in make equalization and make accessible the science to the large public.
Yeah, exactly. And I will even add to that, to what you're saying. I feel that, nowadays we have more ways to communicate with the public than a generation ago or so. And since this media exists, social media, online journalism, if we don't, bring in science into these spaces, then these spaces will maybe become areas where the pseudoscientific and misinformation and the loss of the ability for science to reach a more broad public will exist that way. I feel that more than just looking at journals and publications that are classically understood to be where science exists. Is that how you feel as well?
Yeah, I feel that too. The problem of pseudoscience will always exist. It's as natural as our way to see the world in binaries. So we always see the world like a, dark or light, black or white, or good or bad. So you will always have this dichotomy of people that will oppose to certain things, or will feel more in communities, that are easy access to one thing. When you allow science communication be so massive using all this media, you just add more voices to talk about this. And when you make people feel that they can be part of a community, that's allow these people per se, per themselves, to develop the skills to learn more. You don't have to be a scientist to get interested in science. You don't have to be a science to talk about science. Um, the method, the stuff that we discover, nature, when we understand the difference between all these things and we get passionate about how to discover things, how to explore things, then we just become part of the conversation. And this is the important thing that internet and social media do today, help us to be part of the conversation. It's an unprecedented time today to do that.
That's exactly right. So, other than like new media communication, do you know or envision more novel ways in which scientists can be integrated into a space that hasn't traditionally been known to be a space where scientists occupy?
Oh, yeah, like there's like amazing examples already going around the world. So one of the that just come to my mind, there's this group that is, I think, started in the UK or the US, or at least one of the founders from the UK. That's called Guerrilla Science. And what they do is they bring science to really, really unusual settings, like a fair, like a music festival. And they do activities that are extremely fun, extremely interesting. They're not complicated to do. They spark the interest. I participate with them in a workshop last year, and I was fortunate to go to one of the events to being actually one of the guides of the science. So we were in a booth in a country fair in upstate New York. And what we did there was like people, was going to see the pigs in one side, the cows, the dog show, eating corn dog and things like that. And then we will have our booth that was like giant mouth, where we will be challenge people to taste different things and how the brain was working with that. And we will have these fascinating, really, really fun experiments that they will come, they will taste, and they will be just like blowing up for very simple experiments, totally safe. And that was a way to bring science to a set that was, for me, not taught before. We usually get this idea that science have to be very formal, teaching a very, like meticulous and like kind of following the method, the scientific method to do things. And the best way actually to communicate sometimes just get out and observe and point out stuff and play. We as human beings love playing, and playing can be a really, really good tool, to just spark interest. So there is a lot of tools, initiatives. I think there will be more with time. People is getting more open to that. Less afraid, to being categorized as like you are not a real scientist, but actually more daring to try. When we get this permission from other people, we dare, and more you dare, more people join to dare with you.
That's exactly the kind of thought, and looking forward to the kind of future that will include science in more aspects in the community and the general public. All right, so we've reached our final question today, Cristian. What I'd like to ask you, what advice or comment can you give right now to senior mentors and leaders in STEM fields, or even more broadly in academia, as a way for them to amplify and support the new directions early career scientists are forging and advancing?
Okay, that's actually pretty simple. You have tons of people doing today science communication, people that really want to participate in the process, that want to go and be a voice for this. What we need now is funding. We need open, not just grants, but actually positions where you can apply to get to do this, to do research, to do activities. Things that are not right now. What people is doing, is most of the science communicators are doing this for a hobby, and then when they get hit by the reality of you cannot do this because you have to eat, they stop, and we lost extremely interesting professionals that could be helping us to transform the landscape of science in Canada and in the world, and we lost them because we don't support them with money. The other thing that it has to change also is we cannot just applaud, efforts from science communicators without actually give a tangible recognition, especially if you are an academic already in a position of like researching or teaching or something like that. If the science communication effort that you do are not part of the evaluation that you get to get a tenure track position or to get more money or incentive, then this is going to die also. you will just push to the scientists just to dedicate to produce the knowledge, but never to communicate it. And is, as we are seeing it in the interview, is crucial that the scientific process go not just by production, but in some point to translation to the public who's paying for this. So universities and academic bodies and institutes have to open places, research positions and positions that are just for science communication and incentives and part of the tenure track program. All this package enable to stimulate the people that's doing this, that these careers are possible, that they are not just hobbies. They should not also be regarded just as like, oh, that's very cute, what are you doing? No, it should be also be regarded as a hard working process. You will not believe the amount of time that myself and colleagues spend preparing materials and creating new content and helping to people to do things. We sacrifice family life, free time, and many other aspects of our life to give this content that we are happy to do. But it's not sustainable in the long time. You have to have a retribution that will help you to continue doing this, dedicated to this.
I wholeheartedly endorse everything you said there. This concludes our interview. Once again, I'd like to thank our guest today, Dr. Cristian Andrés Zaelzer Pérez, for coming on our program and speaking to us about the fantastic topics we covered today. BEaTS Research Radio is supported by the University of Ottawa Heart Institute, BEaTS Research Lab, and the Department of Biochemistry, Microbiology, and Immunology in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Ottawa. Our AV producer is Alex Ross, and our director is Dr. Emilio Alarcon. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and we'll see you again soon with another Science for the Community episode. Thank you.